Okay, libel, as I said, it's a big deal, and we're going to spend quite a bit of time on it in this class. And I'm getting a little warning here that I don't believe, so let me get rid of that warning. Okay, starting again. Libel, as I said, is a pretty big deal, and it does have a lot of different aspects to it. This, to give you an idea of how many different aspects this has, when I first started teaching this course, libel actually had 3 separate chapters. And what they've done over time is kind of condensed it down into 2 and now into 1 big chapter. But libel is clearly a big deal. And I've already asked you to sort of start thinking about libel with the case of the 2 boxers there, and hopefully at this point you kind of do have an idea of whether you think that boxer, James Toney, should have been able to sue successfully for libel. That opinion may well change after you watch our presentation about libel. What you're going to find overall is that it's tremendously difficult to win a libel suit in the United States, especially if you are somebody who is considered a public official or a public figure. And that's on purpose, for reasons that I will talk about in the presentation. Bottom line is, if somebody is famous or somebody is well known or somebody is involved in politics, you can say a whole lot of things about them that you might think you shouldn't be allowed to say about them and essentially get away with it. Because what happens is the burden of proof shifts to that person, basically to prove not only that what you said isn't libelous, isn't false, is false, I should say, but actually to prove, you know, the opposite is true. So, as I said, libel is it's very difficult for a public official to win. For a private person, it's still a little bit difficult, but not nearly as difficult. And so what you're going to see is there are 3 separate presentations here, so even though the chapters have come down to 3, I still have 3 different presentations, because I do think there are 3 different distinct parts to talk about here. So what we'll begin by doing is sort of talk about the things, well, first of all, talk about what libel is overall, and then we'll kind of talk about what somebody has to prove to win a libel suit, and then within that we'll start to talk about this idea of fault and how fault becomes much more difficult for somebody who is a public figure. And then finally, we will talk about how you can then defend yourself against a libel suit. But bottom line, United States, it's pretty hard to win a libel suit, especially if you're a public figure. It's much easier in countries like England, for example, for public officials and public figures to win libel suits than it is in the United States. So keep that in mind as you watch our libel presentation here. And so I have the presentations, and then I also have an example of how libel suits can actually come about through accidents of editing. I have an article about asking the question, can you libel somebody on Twitter or Facebook? The answer is yes. I also have a couple of examples that are mentioned in the course of the libel proceedings. And then I've got a couple of my own examples where I sort of have an example from the Globe newspaper where if you read through it after you've done all this studying about libel, you might be able to see why Chelsea Clinton couldn't win a libel suit based on that. And then I have a headline from the New York Post about Lindsay Lohan, Britney Spears, and Paris Hilton one night when they went out on the town, and the headline to that, well, I'll just let you look at it. So libel is a big deal, and also I have an additional video presentation talking about the Internet and how one of the issues with the Internet is sometimes we don't know who actually libeled you. You know, somebody libeled you on Twitter, but their screen name is HockeyBoy444. Well, if you have been libeled, there are ways that you can basically find out who HockeyBoy444 is, and so I have an additional video that talks about that. So, libel, enjoy it. It's important.